Welcome to Decades of Heistery, where we cover safecrackers and bank heists from 1926 up until U.S. involvement in World War II. It is May 1927, and our Quick Hitters video takes us to New Mexico for the first time. Then we'll head back to Indiana, return to Montana, and see if we can draw any connections between a new heist and what may either be an entirely new robbery crew or a new heist by the East Helena crew that we covered earlier. We'll check out a prison break in Belfast, Northern Ireland, and revisit another of our regular haunts, Los Angeles, California. The Brownsville Herald starts us off with its May 2nd, 1927 front page. Alleged bank bandit taken was the title. For that, we head to Amarillo, Texas for a bank robbery turned paternity story turned arrest. Bank officials from Roosevelt County, New Mexico were on their way to Amarillo, Texas to identify a man named Alan Burks. Burks' alias was Jack Allen. He'd been arrested on May 1st in connection with the heist of a bank in Elida, E-L-I-D-A, New Mexico. That robbery occurred on April 21st. A Jack Dyer had been arrested in Amarillo, Texas a week previous and was being held in Portales, New Mexico. Meanwhile, a Norman E. Akins was arrested in Iowa Park, Texas on Friday, presumably that's April 29th, and was identified in New Mexico as one of three who'd participated in that robbery. Incidentally, that robbery netted them $3,200. So two of the three had been picked up, leaving only Alan Burks, aka Jack Allen, on the loose. Allen, however, was arrested at a local hospital where his wife was convalescing after giving birth to their child last week. The New York edition of the Daily Worker, dated May 27, 1927, ran a pithy story titled $35,000 Bank Robbery. For that, we head to Hammond, Indiana, where we learn that three armed bandits robbed the Maywood Trust and Savings Bank of $35,000. Scant details were provided, but it appears that the bandits robbed Norman Kriskos, director, and Miss Lavinia Green, teller. That cash had been withdrawn from the Citizens National Bank for the Standard Steel Car Company to meet its payroll. The Producer's News blasted a large title in large font on its front page. Dated May 13, 1927, the story read, "Lone Unmasked Bandit Robs Butte Bank in Broad Daylight." If that wasn't enough, it had a sizable subtitle. Within block and half of police station, robber forces cashier to give him $1,500 at point of gun. Officers followed Dylan clue. Bandit who robbed Helena Bank 3 weeks ago, still at large. One could assume that covers pretty much everything, but we'll dig into the paper and see if there's more. For that, we'll head to Butte, Montana, and the Miners Bank of Butte, which was indeed located 1.5 blocks from the police station. Now, this article compared the robbery that we covered back in our April 1927 follow-ups video involving an East Helena, Montana heist, and that occurred toward the end of April. This was the story of the injured smelter worker who was all bandaged up, or it was the work of the person from LA that we called the Mummy, who'd broadened his reach from Los Angeles to Montana. I see the similarity between the East Helena and Butte heists being that the bandit escaped, but a major tactical difference was that in the East Helena one, there's a reason we called him either an injured smelter worker or the Mummy, and that his face was bandaged, but in the Butte one, he was unmasked. So that's really inconclusive. The article even referenced Plentywood, Montana. We covered the raid of the county treasurer's office in Plentywood, Montana back in January of 1927. This was when the robbers threatened the workers there with Wheelock, North Dakota-like treatment. Recall that the Wheelock, North Dakota-like treatment referenced the killing of cashier H.N. Peterson. We also traced that robbery combine's activity in Malta, Montana, in their use of Plentywood as something of a headquarters. They drew parallels between the Plentywood and East Helena jobs, but really the only similarity was in each case, 2 employees were locked in the vault. But that's not a unique signature for that robbery crew. It was, in fact, an extremely common bank heist tactic. So here are the Miners Bank of Butte robbery details. A lone, armed, unmasked bandit entered the Miners Bank about 1 p.m. on Thursday, May 12th. The lobby was empty at the time, but 5 employees were engaged at their workstations. Harry Temby and Clarence Staples, both tellers, were working at their teller windows, while bookkeeper Edlo Chancellor was in an office area in the back of the bank, and cashier Tom Fenlon was at his desk in the front. While the robber walked up to the 5th worker, assistant cashier Hugo Kennick. In a quiet voice, the robber said, quote, "Give me your money," end quote. At the same time, he pushed a note written in pencil, which read, quote, "Keep quiet or I'll get you first," end quote. Well, Kennick naturally looked down, read the note, and when he looked up, he faced a pistol that the robber kept partially concealed by his coat. Kennick secretly pressed the police alarm and apparently made a calculation. He had $10,000 in his money drawer, but decided to gyp the robber instead. On the counter beside him were 3 packages containing $500 increments in 20, 10, and $5 bills, therefore netting him $1,500. Kennick pushed them toward the robber like a poker player going all in. The robber filled his coat with the packets and said, quote, "Now throw up your hands," end quote, to which Kennick complied. The robber backed out and then said, quote, "Now put them down," end quote. Then he fumbled with the door and disappeared. Now, allegedly, the police were on his trail within 5 minutes. And supposedly the police found clues, one of which led Police Chief Jer Murphy, that's Jere, to Dillon, Montana, which is about an hour south as the crow flies. But that clue failed to work out. So police revised their thinking and were working under the theory that the robber had remained in Butte overnight. The Seward Daily Gateway printed a visually appealing paper. It had only 5 columns, while most had 7 to 8, and that allowed for more spacing. They also used larger font, which maybe appeals to me due to my aging eyesight, and their bold headlines also stood out. Its May 19, 1927 edition ran a broad range of stories. It could be because it was an Alaska paper and therefore aggregated stories from around the world. Not far from this nice-looking ad about canned peas were stories about Great Britain following the U.S. approach to China by not dispatching harsh notes in protest over, quote, outrages, end quote, in Nanking, China. We see continued international rumblings in Mexico with its ongoing civil war / revolution. We see activity in Berlin in the Reichstag, and we see accusations of espionage within the French army. At home, a KKK official received a life sentence for what became a famous case, that of the rape and murder of Miss Madge Oberholtzer. I've included a link for more on that story. For our purposes, we dive into prisoners escape in car, and for that we head to Belfast, Northern Ireland. We learn that an unknown number of people from outside the prison helped 4 prisoners escape. The 4 were serving long sentences for charges ranging from manslaughter to bank robbery. The quartet was able to escape, quote, in a powerful automobile which was in readiness outside the walls, end quote. The expansive and loaded front page of the Sunday Star from May 15, 1927, squeezed in a story titled, 2 Young Men Rob Bank. Now, we just covered a spate of Los Angeles bank heists performed by mostly young men in possibly 1 or 2 different gangs in our March 1927 Quick Hitters episode. Well, they may still have been at it, despite the killing of one of them. Recall C.W. Arnold, the Beverly Hills, California lumberman, whose story we covered in the April 1927 Quick Hitters video. Well, it appeared that 2 young and well-dressed men held up the Lorena and Whittier Boulevard branch of the Bank of Italy on May 14, 1927, netting them between $14,000 and $15,000. Well, the result of all this is that we have a brand new father under arrest. We have 3 suddenly wealthy Indiana crooks and 2 Los Angeles youths on the lam. And we have a possible new score by our Montana robber. We'll turn these stories into follow-ups as details become available in the months to come. In our next main story video, we'll head to a prison break in Illinois. And of course, what would an episode be without another appearance of Matt Kimes hitting a pair of banks in Oklahoma? I want to thank you for spending your time with Decades of Heistery. Till next time.